second or third largest city in the world.
It should be the third one, but actually, if you count the thing is that the city
Depends on how you count. Yeah.
it has been growing a lot, and if you count the following parts, the following delegations, as we call them, it's actually bigger than any part of China or Japan. So
yeah, because Tokyo is always top, right?
That's number one.
And then it's, Seoul and Mexico City and Shenzhen and a bunch of Indian and Chinese cities.
That we're not going to pretend that we know how to pronounce the names of
yeah. Well, yes, Patrick does look different today, Nick with a C, because Patrick's not here today. Instead, we're very happy to have Dan Campos.
To be here. Actually, I was in one of Patrick's shows a lot of some time ago, so I don't promise that I can do a French accent, but well.
But we would like you to try in the post show, please.
We'll
all do it so you don't feel singled out.
Like Wonder Woman.
Patrick can be mad at all of us. All right, you guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sarah?
I will be ready in 2. I'm ready.
2 seconds. All right. Here. Wait. Oh, where's my thing? There. Okay. Here we go. Daily Tech News Show is powered by you. To find out more, head to dailytechnewsshow.com/support. This is the Daily Tech News for Tuesday, November 28th, 2017 from DTNS headquarters in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline at the beach, I am Sarah Lane.
And from Mexico City, we're very happy to have Dan Campos, media manager at Genoma Lab, with us as well. How are you, Dan?
I am excellent, thank you. And yes, I'm reporting live from Mexico City, where we might not speak Esperanto, but we speak Spanish.
We will one day do a show in Esperanto.
Oh, why you gotta say something?
Why you gotta promise that?
Maybe.
We gotta practice.
Producer Roger Chang is here as well, also not speaking in Esperanto.
No, and probably never will. I guarantee it. I'll give you steak sauce if I'm wrong.
We're going to talk to Dan about media distribution. A lot of times we hear people say, yeah, you guys always talk about Netflix in the US and Hulu, and we don't get Hulu. So we're going to talk about how it works in Mexico and other places in the world. But let's start with a few tech things you should know. Breaking right before we started recording this show, developer Limai Orhan Ergin posted on Twitter that in macOS High Sierra, if you type in root as the username, leave the password box blank, and then hit enter and click on unlock a few times. It won't work the first time, but you keep clicking on unlock, the prompt will disappear, and you'll be logged in as an admin and get to do anything to that machine that an admin can do. If you have a root account enabled and a password for it set, though, that trick won't work. So A, don't leave your Mac unattended where someone can get at it. B, set a root account. You can do that by going to terminal and entering sudo password, PASSWD /u or -u, sorry, and root. You can look it up online too, but you might want to set a root password just in case.
Co-working company WeWork, known for actual physical spaces where people co-work, has agreed to buy Meetup, which is the 2002 company founded to organize meetups. So sort of a physical company buying a virtual company. TechCrunch points out that in the last 6 months, WeWork has been on a bit of a tear, has acquired construction communications company Fieldlens, Singapore co-working company Space Mob, enterprise sales and marketing company Unomi, and coding bootcamp Flatiron School.
I'm just a little sad that Space Mob is not something spacier or mobbier. Russia lost contact with its Meteor M weather satellite shortly after launch Tuesday morning from Russia's newest spaceport, Vostochny. The satellite failed to reach its designated orbit. It's meant to carry out a 5-year mission to collect images and data for Russia's weather agency, but it doesn't look like it'll get to do that. The rocket also carried 18 other satellites from other countries.
Plex confirmed to TechCrunch that it's rolling out a feature for its over-the-air DVR function that will, this might make some people happy, automatically remove commercials from recordings. Plex's documentation warns that this feature is going to take some time and it can cause high CPU utilization. It's available in beta now for Plex Pass subscribers.
And I know Dan was not happy to hear about this.
Yeah, I love Plex, but this kind of hurts me right in my pocket.
Because you work in advertising. Huh?
That's correct.
All right, Sarah, we got some more top stories.
Yes, we do. U.S. District Judge William Alsup ruled that Uber had withheld evidence and granted Waymo a request to delay the trade secrets trial that has been scheduled to begin next week. Waymo learned of the new evidence last week when it was shared with Judge Alsup by the U.S. Department of Justice. It involves a letter from former Uber security analyst Richard Jacobs' lawyer that alleges Uber's market analytics group, quote, exists expressly for the purpose of acquiring trade secrets, code base, and competitive intelligence.
Okay, nothing's going to sound good when Uber's involved these days. And I'm not saying this is great. They should have caught this. The new Uber under Khosrowshahi might be excused as overlooking it. But the trend in this case has been for them to drag their feet. The historic attitude of Uber is to kind of flout regulations and laws. I don't think, though, aside from, yes, this letter should have been entered into evidence, it should not have been withheld. I don't think it's unusual for companies to have departments dedicated to looking out for trade secrets. Now, legally acquiring them, obviously, but not stealing them. But I think that's kind of a normal part of many large businesses, no?
I mean, at this point, it is hard for me to follow.
It's hard for everybody to follow.
It's like, yeah, I agree with you, Tom. It's like, I'm not really in the camp of like, Uber's evil. This is obviously really bad necessarily. But this story kind of broke last night and I've been trying to parse it. And Mike Isaac over the New York Times is kind of on the Uber case, maybe more so than any other journalist right now. And he gets kind of breathless about this stuff. So I always pay attention. And, it's like, it's hard for me to wrap my head around what's going on these days.
Dan, does it strike you as odd that Uber would have a market analytics group expressly for the purpose of acquiring trade secrets, code base, and competitive intelligence?
Well, as you mentioned before, pretty much every big company has a department that, with a different name, usually does the same kind of work. However, I have a different question. Like, how longer will be the grace period for the new CEO? In this case, for Uber?
Yeah, how long? I mean, I don't think anybody's giving Uber a grace period when Uber's name comes up. I think when Khosrowshahi's name comes up, then yeah, people do tend to take a little nicer approach to him. I think, I don't know. I would like to say when all of the scandals of the old administration have been played out, that then everybody will say, okay, now everything's on you, Dara. But I wonder how long that will take, or if we'll ever have a point where we can definitively say, okay, that was all colonic, and now it's all under the new one.
I also think, a company like Uber, that's obviously the market leader, but it has clear competitors in the space and will continue to as everybody gets into the self-driving game. At face value, having a group that's designed to make sure they understand what the competition is doing, as long as it's all happening above board legally, is not in itself that big a deal, I don't think. That's kind of understandable. It's one of the tactics that they're using to gain information that's at question.
Bingo. Real quickly before we move on, I'm curious, Dan, what's the ride-hailing scene like in Mexico City?
Obviously, Uber was the first one to get in here. After that, it was Cabify, and different services were coming in here. And pretty much prices have come to a point where there is not that much difference if you take a regular cab and if you use any of these other services. But the convenience always wins over.
Gotcha. Microsoft introduced a new Windows 10 function called Sets. It allows apps to open other apps in a tab without needing to launch the other app separately. So let me give you an example. If you're in Word, you want to look up something in Edge in the browser, you could just open a tab in Word, look something up in the browser, and you don't have to go launch the browser and change your window. It's saving you a couple clicks. Also, you can save the tabs that you have open. Let's say you've got your Notes tab open and you've got your Edge tab open. Maybe you even have an Excel tab open in Word. You can save all those tabs with the file for viewing later on the same device or on other devices if you're saving it to OneDrive. Sets will launch first to a select number of users in the Windows Insider program in the coming weeks. That's another notable thing, launching something to a portion of Windows Insider rather than everybody at once.
You know, it's kind of funny that the concept of like, oh, not having to go to the browser to get to the internet, you know, at least in the, you know, like a desktop experience, hasn't been integrated in a lot more services sooner. I'm still kind of getting used to the fact that on my phone, if I search for something, now I get a bunch of internet results rather than having to like tap my Chrome, my app. But yeah, this seems like if you can get used to the workflow and it doesn't seem weird to you, then saving a couple clicks always helps.
I will always have separate sets of tabs just from the browser. So this was a revelation to me when I saw this. I'm like, yes, I absolutely will do this in Microsoft Word. I'm not sure that I'll ever have a use case to do it in Excel, but maybe I will. Dan, does it sound like something you would use?
Actually, yes. A long time ago, I used to work at university. So, for example, in the educational playing field, this will be very helpful for teachers. So you can have pretty much all the information and all the links, even for Wikipedia, for any of the classes that you have that you are preparing.
Here's an interesting story. Epic Games, maker of the Fortnite survival shooter game, filed a lawsuit against a 14-year-old boy over his use of game modifications that came from cheating software. So software designed to make you better at shooting a gun, that sort of thing. The boy's mother has filed a legal note calling for Epic's lawsuit to be thrown out, arguing that her son didn't actually develop the cheats, he didn't distribute them, he just downloaded them from a popular cheating website and then streamed himself using the cheats. However, Epic says, no, that's not really what happened. The real issue was that the boy was promoting the software on YouTube on a video and claims he refused to take down that how-to guide video for using the cheating software. So it's kind of one of these cases of like, you say like, ooh, 14, he's just a kid. And Epic's like, well, but if this was anybody else, this is totally inappropriate. And he's promoting the cheating software that obviously shouldn't be being distributed.
I have two minds on this story, and neither one of them have to do with going after a 14-year-old boy, which, come on. I mean, Epic, that's just, you're not going to win points.
Yeah, it's never a really good look.
And the mom's note is, for lack of a better word, epic. So I know why that's getting all of the attention here. But I do understand what Epic's saying, which is the way the DMCA works in the US and the way YouTube works. They put Epic in a position where they kind of had to do something. They had to take some kind of legal action. And if you don't understand, what YouTube does is if someone files a claim for copyright, they alert you and say, hey, somebody filed a claim on this. And you can say, no, it's fine. It's fair use, or I have the rights or whatever. And then the filing company, in this case, Epic, can say, no, we really mean it. We are filing an official DMCA claim notifying you have to take it down. That's the actual takedown notice. If you say no to that one, then their only recourse is to sue you. You're basically saying, take me to court if you believe that I'm in violation. I've done that before. I have had people say, your episode of DTNS or Tech News Today, in one case, violates copyright. And we got to the point where I said, well, then you're going to have to take me to court. And they dropped it. This kid did that. He said, well, then you're going to have to take me to court. And so Epic either would have to tacitly admit that he wasn't violating their copyright or file a case against him. And the way the DMCA works, if he's doing anything that circumvents copyright, they have to file the case to say, well, you are encouraging people. That's against the DMCA, encouraging people to circumvent copyright. And maybe the cheats do that. I don't know, but that could be what their case is. And they say, well, we have to fight this, or it could be used as a precedent against us. They could say, well, you didn't sue this kid, and you filed a notice against him. YouTube has a record of you filing a notice. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. Where I get to the other end of it is there a copyright violation in showing a cheat? That I'm a little unclear on. Is it showing people how to circumvent copyright protection to cheat, in which case clear cut, DMCA? Or is it just, well, we don't like this, but he's showing our game footage, so we'll use copyright to get it taken down? I know that was a long.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think, there would be obviously less eye rolling / outrage if this was a 34-year-old man rather than a kid. And you're right, Tom. If you read the note from the mom, as The Verge pointed out, it's like, well, she's either a lawyer, or she knows a good lawyer, or she's extremely good at researching legal stuff, because it's quite well written and she makes a lot of good points. But at the same time, yeah, it's as a company who it's very easy to just be like, oh, you're just the bad guy. It's like, well, there's some situations where your hands are tied a bit because of the law.
A group of investors led by SoftBank has offered to buy Uber shares based on a valuation that's 30% below the last private valuation. That last private valuation estimated the value of Uber at $70 billion. So 30% below would be about $50 billion. Uber announced a few weeks ago it had entered into an agreement with a consortium led by SoftBank and Dragoneer. Some Uber employees and other investors would be allowed to sell shares, something they wouldn't normally be able to do until an IPO. If the deal is completed, Benchmark Capital has reportedly agreed to drop its lawsuit against founder Travis Kalanick. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about this either. I mean, we wrapped it all up in the other Uber conversation, but it is interesting to note that SoftBank is wanting to put money, in this case at a discount, it seems, into Uber. And it may be that SoftBank ends up answering your question, Dan, by just sort of subsuming that and saying, you know what, it's nobody's fault now. We're the new owners eventually. We'll see.
Well, I have some kind of fun news for people who like aircraft technology and innovation. Rolls-Royce, Airbus, and Siemens, kind of an unlikely trio, but there you go, announced that they are developing a hybrid electric plane they hope will be ready for test flights by 2020. The E-Fan X is a propeller, I guess, as it's called, could be on commercial passenger planes by 2025 and would replace one of the passenger plane's 4 jet engines with an electric one to help not only save fuel, but also meet emission and noise standards.
We've been promised these kinds of planes for a long time. They're very difficult to make work because the weight of the batteries needed to make it worthwhile is usually too much, but the batteries are getting slimmer, they're getting more efficient. So I guess one engine is a step along the road, right?
Will we need some sort of Elon Musk to drive this kind of research further?
One engine makes the most sense because it's cheaper to implement. You still have 3 traditional engines, so passengers aren't freaked out. And on approach, you don't need as much power. So if you can use more of the E engine as you come in, you still have issues with noise abatement, but it probably won't be as loud as a Pratt & Whitney cranked up all the way.
When you say that you have issues with noise abatement, you're saying that the electric engine is just as noisy?
Like, it will probably be less noisy, but
okay.
it's gonna make a fair amount of noise. I mean,
it's still noisy, even if it's a slight.
A hairdryer has many of the same properties as this engine will, and it makes a lot of noise.
And it's electric, right? Yeah. I don't run my hairdryer off a gas engine. I don't know if any of you do, but
I didn't realize you had a hairdryer, Tom. Learn something new every day.
Well, I share one. Under California law, I'm a part owner of
That's good for emission standards, sharing hair dryers.
Yes, exactly. Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, be sure to subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com. It's available as a podcast. You can get it on the Amazon Echo or on the Google Home and in the Anchor app. Go check out all of them at once. All right. Last week, AT&T announced an agreement with both HBO Go and Netflix to let users of their internet service pay for streaming in the same bill they pay their phone service with AT&T Conecta. So this is happening in Mexico. We've had similar things happen in the United States, but this arrangement in Mexico is with HBO Go, with HBO and Netflix. You're saying that this is a response to other services, right, Dan?
That's correct. Actually, we have different services. Obviously, we get streaming services as Netflix or Amazon Prime Video in here. However, the kind of deals that the different companies, local companies like Telmex, they pretty much own over 70% of the infrastructure for telecommunications in here. They have their own platform, which is called Claro Video. And they have already some deals that, for example, if you want to have HBO Go, you actually can do it using the service that they are offering. So in this way, the main competitor that they are having right now, which is AT&T, is trying to level a little bit the play field by signing these kind of deals. And it's kind of interesting because at least for television content, it's kind of a closed environment. It's really hard to have someone else as a new competitor. However, in the case of streaming services, it's easier to do, and this is how they are trying to compete in here. The importance that this deal in particular has is that, well, AT&T is offering a new service. As you mentioned, in the United States, you have similar offerings in there, and I'm sure that pretty much in the rest of the world, we have that. However, this also plays in the way that the Mexican economy works, because we kind of don't trust banks as much as in the United States. So for the payment of the services, in this case, Netflix or the same HBO Go, instead of using my credit card, I'd rather use the service that I have already hired. In this case, my cell phone service with AT&T, and use the charge with them for an extra offering that they are giving to me. And they are, in this case, playing with the rules that are working the best for other services here in this country.
Yeah, so Telmex, which owns Claro Video, you said owns about 70% of the infrastructure for telecommunications. That's a tough thing for it's funny for US people, I think, to think of AT&T as the underdog, but that's a tough thing for AT&T to try to break into.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, for example, I believe that it was later last week or early, perhaps it was yesterday, there has been an ongoing trial because competitors of Telmex want to use the infrastructure without paying a commission to Telmex. However, the judge said, well, you are using something that has been made by a different company, so it's their right to charge you for the use of this service. So that's why they are trying to, well, if we cannot have our own infrastructure in this case, how can we level the play field so we can be a little bit more competitive in this case?
So it's a workaround to try to not, I think entrap might be too strong of a word, but to say, well, if people are wanting to have everything on one bill, we get them to pay their cell phone bill to us and their Netflix bill and their HBO bill, then suddenly they won't want to leave us, and we'll have a competitive advantage.
That's correct. And also, it's kind of interesting because the kind of deals that they are doing, it's with the, let's say that like the lower tier in the case of Netflix, because it's cheap and you have old shows and obviously the Netflix originals, but you have also HBO Go, which let's say that is like the high bar in quality in TV production. And one thing that I want to mention is that also, besides the means that are being used to distribute the content, it's really important to see the arrangement for the distributions and the rights that you have to pay for the different TV shows, the different film companies, which is also some of the difference that we have in this case in Latin America or in Mexico, because even, and you know, Tom, when you travel, I believe that it was to England, you had a different set of shows in there that perhaps you were like, well, perhaps I can download some of these to watch them while I am on the plane. And it's the same in here. Obviously, it depends on the kind of rights management that you have in the rest of the world, and also in the kind of channels that you have. For example, Warner, the CW shows were really hard to get in a streaming service. That has changed. For example, Netflix has been doing wonderful work in there, but it was really hard to watch shows as like Friends. Before, it was only on the TV channels on cable, and you couldn't watch it in a different platform. And it's also something that affects cinema distribution and films. I remember one particular case that, well, let's say that I was a little bit involved of one movie. I don't remember if have you heard about Ex Machina?
Oh yeah, no, I saw that. That was a great movie.
All right, so that's an independent sci-fi film, and it was the rights for the distribution in this country, in Mexico, were owned by a friend of mine for Cine Cannibal, and they have the arrangement to distribute it on movie theaters here in Mexico. However, a different company which also owns, it's one of the big chains in movie distribution because they have a movie theater. Let's say that they are like the Mexican AMC with the outlet theaters. They got the rights for digital distributions. And because they have a better offering in this case, they weren't going to compete in the movie theaters, but they were going to compete in the digital distribution. And
wait, the theater chain has digital distribution rights. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and for example, one of the things that you can actually, let me see if I can send you a link. If you search for Cinepolis, which is the name of the brand, they actually are very smart trying to do some packages. In the case, for example, Justice League or Wonder Woman movie, you can get one special ticket. The ticket, what does this include? It includes the ticket for the movie. It also includes the digital version of the movie when it's released, that's that one. And you also get different kind of extras. So you can pay once for the movie and have it in 3 different means. You can watch it on the movie theater, which is the first experience, and then have the digital experience. What we're looking at the screen is actually the offerings that they have for Cinepolis Click, some of those, which is the streaming service that they have. Getting back to the first point, they own the rights for the digital distribution of Ex Machina. And for example, my friend had the rights for distribution on the regular theaters, but because they had the rights for the digital distribution, they were like, everybody's going rather to watch it at home, the same movie with the streaming offering instead of going to the theater. So they decided not to release it in Mexico.
Oh, wow. That's kind of turning the entire dynamic on its head compared to the way it works here. But I feel like the theaters having digital distribution, even if it's maybe causing some unintended consequences like that, is a good thing for the theaters. I mean, theaters in the US ought to take a cue from Mexican theaters that way.
And also, for example, when you mention in different shows like in Core Killers, the quality of the theaters that we have in the United States, sometimes I am like, well, yes, but if you only knew the quality, and obviously it's cheaper in here. I am sending you in the chat one link for the Cinepolis Click, which is actually the digital offering. And in there, if Roger could help us, you will see that it's what I was mentioning for 200 pesos, which will be like $10 in the United States. You own the digital version of the Justice League, and you actually could get a ticket to watch it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Now, do you have a lot of, we're going to have to move on here real quick, but one last question. Do you have a lot of TV streaming online services like we have with PlayStation Vue or Sling TV?
Not really, because obviously we have some sort of those services, but still most of the people rather have a Roku. And I believe that it was mentioned before that one of the companies here in distribution, which was Televisa, which owns Blim and Cablevisión, they actually had to sue and stop the distribution of the Roku sticks here in Mexico because a lot of people were looking for pirate content, or I mean the channels that were
they were using the pirated.
So that's or let's say that's our version of the PlayStation Vue.
It's not exactly what Sony would like to be compared to, but I get what you're saying. There is a roll your own version that is the most popular there. Well, excellent. Thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Give us some ideas for these kinds of topics, and in Facebook at facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow. Let's check in with Chris Christensen for some thoughts on international roaming service while you're traveling.
This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler with another Tech in Travel Minute. I just got back from the T-Mobile office where my family and I switched to T-Mobile, and one of the reasons we did that is they have a plan where not only am I saving money off my AT&T family rates, but also when I travel internationally, they have international roaming at a low speed, not a high speed roaming, but at least a little bit of data that I can get in a lot of different countries for no additional cost. And so I'm finding that a lot of my travel blogger friends have also switched to T-Mobile so that they don't necessarily have to get a SIM when they go to a different country and yet can have connectivity. So something you might look into if you travel a lot. Even if you don't, their rates are pretty good and worth looking at. especially if you're in the US. I'm Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler.
Yeah, you do end up sometimes getting slower service, but it is nice to just get off that plane and not have to worry about it and just connect. By the way, Silverblade says that Cineplex in Canada does a similar thing to Cinepolis called a super ticket. So you get to watch the movie and get a download. That's interesting. All right, let's check our mailbag. What's in there, Sarah?
Chris Mercer lives in Australia and says, I've been listening to DTNS about a year, finally made the step up for Patreon. So thanks to you, Chris. Says it might have been even number 5,000 or thereabouts, because that's what it said when he made his contribution. Also, we were talking about time zones a little bit in the pre-show, and this is kind of like a good story about living in Australia. It says, the real benefit I'm gained from the show, I'm in Brisbane, Australia, so I get the podcast first thing in the morning from the previous day. I listen to them on the way to work. The timing's really good. My trip's about 25 minutes. On the day that the Equifax leak came out, I heard it first from you guys on my way to work. It was great timing because I had a meeting with our digital team. We started talking about our identity management tool set. The tech lead for the area was talking about through the current state and said something like, and then we pass the details to Equifax and then they validate the info. At which point I had a minor heart attack and I began relaying the breaking news that I had. Thanks to the show, I was able to talk specifics as well. Luckily for us, the Australian Equifax was historically a company called Veda and had been bought recently by Equifax and then rebranded. So their systems were isolated and not affected. A few hours of panic there though. And then he says, love the show. Hope my story helps convince people of the value.
Oh, thank you, Chris. That's very nice. And we're just going to pretend you were number 5,000 for this point. So
absolutely. And it's cool. You know, it's cool to hear that even if you're getting what's technically yesterday's news ends up being really helpful for a meeting first thing in the morning.
But if you're in Australia, you're living in tomorrow. So does that make it tomorrow's news?
I guess.
Is that how that works? I don't
know.
Well, folks, we are not here to ponder the intricacies of time travel. We're here to bring you the tech news, and we thank you for joining us. And we thank Dan Campos for joining us. Dan, where can people find more of what you do online?
Well, it's actually easier if they just follow me on Twitter. I appear as Dan Campos, or if you want to practice your Spanish or perhaps your English, just search for Churros y Palomitas, where we have talks with people who actually deal with movie distributions, as we were talking before, film directors, and recently with famous authors as Tom Merritt or even Paul Cornell, which actually we had a great interview with him last week.
Excellent. Go check it out. Churros y Palomitas. Is there a URL for it? churrosypalomitas.com. Thank you. Gracias. Muchas gracias, Dan Campos, for joining us. And thank you to our patrons for supporting us. All of you guys make it possible for us to do this show. Our roundtable show is coming Thursday because you got us to the level that got Sarah Lane on the show, got a bunch of new perks, including the roundtable show. So Bart Buchatz, Rich Struffolino, Justin Robert Young are all going to be on the roundtable Thursday. We're doing it Thursday because November is ending at a weird time and we had Thanksgiving. If you're an advisor of the show, if you support us at that level, you get the right to vote one of the topics into the roundtable show. And you can do that right now by heading over to patreon.com/DTNS.
If you have any other feedback, we'd love to hear it. Obviously, we read some of the stuff on the show, but we try to read everything. Otherwise, feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com is the email address. We're live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 UTC at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. And our website is dailytechnewsshow.com.
We'll be back tomorrow, and I believe it's with Scott Johnson. We'll find out tomorrow.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Oh, that was a great show. Thank you, Dan.
No, it was a pleasure. Sorry if sometimes I kind of mispronounce things, but I guess it went okay.
Oh no, you're
great.
way too kind with my butchering of Spanish. So I am certainly not going to throw any stones at you because your pronunciation of English is quite good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and this was a great interview. This was a great talk, and we hit on that unexpected thing about the super ticket type stuff, which I didn't even know about.
And to be quite honest, I don't remember, because I remember that I was looking for different options to illustrate how different are the offerings in here, but it didn't came to my mind because it's like I don't know, something regular in my case.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Sometimes you don't realize what's really cool about the thing you're familiar with because you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what should we call this show, Roger? Or can you not unmute?
There we go. Cheater, cheater, epic eater. Flying hair dryers would still make noise. Mexican theaters was inteligente, más inteligente. Mac OS copies Windows 95. Mom's epic rebuke. Epic lawsuit. Timeshare hair dryers. Mexican theaters innovate. You got internet in my everywhere. The Rolls Royce of airplanes is in fact just the
literally, because it's partly made by Rolls Royce.
Right.
Uber ruins everything. I don't know. I think Mexican theater is más inteligente.
Would it be están? Teatros de México están más inteligente?
Actually, it should be. Well, yeah, I get the point, but it will be los cines mexicanos son más inteligentes.
Son, okay. Los cines mexicanos son más inteligente.
I feel like I am coaching on I don't know.
You are. You're too kind. I'm actually good with that. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
I think that's the clear winner.
Cines have an accent?
No, but más, you have an accent in the A.
Mexicanos. Los cines mexicanos?
Mm-hmm. Son más.
Más with an accent.
So when would you use películas instead of cine?
Películas refer to the actual movie, and cine is like for the movie
Theater.
The
Teatro would be like a play, right?
Which ones? That's correct. The teatro is the theater in this case, or the room, the place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still kind of amazed, because I always use a faster playback speed on my pocket my podcast listening. So it's like, so this is how you actually sound.
Yeah, that happened to me. I was on This Week in Science with Dr. Kiki and Justin and Blair, and I'm like, oh, they're talking so slow. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, the pauses feel more dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or drunken, depending. Alrighty then. So what else is new?
We're going to record in 20 minutes.
There was somebody in the ongoing saga of my apartment building. The internet's fine, obviously, but
oh right, yeah, we didn't follow up on that.
Yeah, we got that fixed. But there's a it's sort of, the building management. He does all the work that needs to be done around the building, and there's always something. So he's around all the time. But this morning he was like power washing the roof.
Okay.
And nobody lives above me, so like the generator that was running the power washer was right above where I like to sit and drink my coffee in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, it was like someone was jackhammering my ceiling. It was one of those things where you're like, come on. I was so happy I wasn't doing headlines this morning, because it's like, not only could I have not concentrated, but like I wouldn't have been able to record it in my house.
Yeah.
Luckily it came and went, but that's all I've got.
So you called Spectrum and they're like, oh,
yeah,
here, let me try something. And then it fixed it, right?
Right. So for anyone's curious, I know a few of you very nicely asked me on Twitter and Slack and stuff like, is everything okay with your internet? And yes, it is. Right after the show yesterday, unplugged it, waited 30 seconds, a few more times, and I went over to my neighbor's. He lives right next door to me. His internet was fine, so I was like, probably not an outage. So at that point, I called Spectrum, got somebody on the phone, and he goes, "Let me." I think his actual words were, "Let me try something on my end." And then I got some hold music, and then he came back and he was like, "How is it now?" And I was like, "Oh, well, the online light's on again. Thank you." And that was it.
Oh, we accidentally disconnected you. Sorry.
Isn't that weird? I was happy that I didn't have to be on the phone with him for more than 5 minutes.
No, sure, of course.
Quick. But and I kind of felt silly, like I just should have called in the beginning, but it's also disconcerting.
Well, you know what I forget, because Spectrum is Time Warner here, is that we have a listener. I'm not going to say their name so I don't get them in trouble or embarrass them, either one. But they work they worked for Time Warner, so they now work for Spectrum. So if we ever have issues with that, we can always ping them and may get some help on that end. But it sounded like got it all taken care of.
I saw that note as well. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just the weirdest, most unfortunate timing, considering that, the show's 30 minutes long. And this just happened to happen in that 30-minute window, right in the middle of the show. But yeah, everything seems okay now.
There's too many toms. That was what it was. There were just too many toms on your modem. It couldn't.
We got greedy. We pushed it just a little too far, and Spectrum was like, "I'm not down with this."
We went with a Dan today. Everything's fine.
Right? Yeah. just know, yeah. When we overload the system, I get kicked out.
Right. That doesn't seem fair.
But such is life.
Yeah.
A series of tragedies.
Now, wait a minute. Right before this always happens to me, and it must be hilarious to people who are listening to the show, and I can actually remember things farther than 30 minutes away. Right before the show, Dan was saying something, and I was like, we should follow up on that after the show. And now I can't remember what it was.
Time zones? No.
What was it?
Time zones? No, because that was like a close topic. I mean, I don't remember neither.
I was
at least it's not just me.
Let's see. I asked about buildings, earthquakes. Oh, the switching of the plates on which days.
Yeah, we were talking. We'd already kind of talked about that. Felt like it was food related. I can hear the people listening to this shouting what it was.
What's this? Well, we can improvise. We can talk about food, as it's one of the preferred topics.
It's certainly one of the frequent topics. What's your favorite kind of food?
One of the things that, for example, you can always have in here is tacos, because you can have tacos of pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
And add anything. There are some that it's shrimp tacos, tacos gobernador is how they are called here in Mexico, that are really tasty.
It sounds good.
Yeah.
It is Taco Tuesday.
That's true. We have I'm going to cause a fight somewhere by saying this. I know we have better tacos in Los Angeles than San Francisco.
San Francisco has better burritos, though.
San Francisco has better burritos. I will not deny that.
Like that kind of burrito. If you like,
if you don't, you're a monster.
I remember George Crow.
I do.
He used to like be very negative. It's like, you never got this in San Diego. And San Diego, rice. Who puts rice in a burrito? And
well, you don't have to. You can say hold the rice, which I often did because I wanted more of the good stuff.
So Dan, I'm curious, in your opinion, what is a proper burrito?
Actually, it depends, because where they prepare the most, it's at the north of the country. So you have Sonora styles and you have Chihuahua style. And depending on the area, it can have either beans or rice. Mm-hmm. And the kind of the flour tortilla is also different. So I'm more partial to beans in my burrito. And then I don't know, some pork or something like that. The cochinita, it's really good.
Is beans the Sonoran or the Chihuahuan style?
I believe it's the Chihuahua, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So then San Francisco probably does the Sonoran style, is my guess. They have flour and rice. They have beans too, but
isn't the flour thing kind of a more recent like introduction?
I don't know.
Like because like traditional burritos, weren't they all corn tortillas? And then only like within the past 20, 25 years, 30 years, were they flour, or they've always been flour?
As far as I remember, no, actually they have always been in flour, if I recall correctly. And because that kind of food actually originated at the north of the country. In the rest of the country, it was like we have burritos from the north, or burritos norteños, doing the reference of where the recipe came. And
Gotcha.
At least I have been alive for 37 years, and as far as I recall, they have always been with flour tortillas.
Do you eat nachos? Or not? Nachos a popular food?
But now that you mention, this is one discussion that I have with a friend. I record a different podcast with her about social things and regular life. And if you go the Cinepolis theater that we were mentioning, they have the base, or the main offices are actually located in Michoacan. And if you go to the cinema, which is where the owner of the company goes, they have a different kind of nachos. Well, you know, the tortilla chips that you use in regular nachos, but they use Doritos nachos in there, Doritos. And they taste actually better. And my friend, she was in shock because she's from Morelia. And when she traveled to Mexico City and she went to the movie theater, she was like, I want some nachos. And she was like, these are not real nachos. Where are the Doritos in this? It's something particular and you can only find it in that city, in Morelia, Michoacan.
Interesting. So supposedly nachos were created in 1943 for Americans in northern Mexico. Just over the border from Eagle Pass.
Or something.
It was Piedras Negras.
I feel like nachos always seem like a good idea and rarely are. They can be good, but they're usually bad.
It's because they tickle that part of your brain that's very...
Where you're just like, I just like the pile of the stuff. You know, it always looks so fun, and then you're like, this is soggy.
It appeals to the child in you, right? The same way that an icy. Like, I always like ices because I say, ooh, I'm going to get an icy. And then when I drink, it's like, I should have gotten an icy. It's way too sweet, and I don't need all the sugar. But it just triggers that adolescent part of your brain. You're like, whoa, I totally want to eat that, or I totally want to drink that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Good nachos are a wonderful experience. I just find that more often than not, I'm like, why did I get this?
Mm-hmm. Now, what is the most popular food in Mexico City right now? If you had to guess.
Well, Mexico City has a peculiarity, and actually, I am actually from Jalisco, but I have been living in this city for some time.
Mm-hmm.
But we usually joke because in Mexico City, you add to everything, you put it inside bread. You put it inside a bolillo. Torta de tamal, which is pretty much really popular in here. But for people from outside Mexico City, it's an aberration of nature.
Most really good foods are at first considered an aberration until they catch on. What about non-Mexican food? Is there any international food making inroads?
Japanese food is really popular, and for example, I live next door to a market, and they have the Japanese restaurant that it's inside. It's actually really good, so it always have a nice reception by an audience.
I'm always fascinated when I travel to go to non-regional restaurants and find the different takes, like the Italian restaurant in Australia, or
that was never. I remember the one Fasta Pasta, and that was like a combination of strings and the Olive Garden. And I was just like it.
The weirdest one I ever went to was an Italian Hong Kong restaurant in San Francisco. So the style of Italian food that became popular in Hong Kong, somebody had decided to do that in San Francisco. It was really, really odd.
It's probably catering to what they thought people or any Hong Kong expats would eat.
Yeah, that seemed to be
Like,
what it
what's
was.
that one? There's there's two Americans that opened up a Chinese restaurant in Beijing or Shanghai, but it's Chinese American. So it's like,
American
all
takes
this
on
stuff.
Chinese food. Yeah, interesting.
It does
be
pretty
like that.
well. So
You
people like
have
it.
Taco Bells in Mexico. It's kind of the same thing, right?
Taco Bell, Del Tacos. Nah.
They actually
No,
opened,
you have to.
What's that, Dan?
they opened a Taco Bell like 10 or 15 years ago in Mexico City, and it just went wrong.
I'm sure.
Longer than 3 months.
It's not Mexican food. That's the thing you have to remember about Taco Bell. Entirely different thing.
Ooh, it's barely food.
Oh, stop.
I said barely. It passes.
You have to navigate the menu carefully.
Just get the chicken. If you want real meat, just get whatever has chicken in it.
Yeah.
I actually have no opinion. It's been so long. I enjoyed Taco Bell quite a bit in my youth.
Well, that is it for us. Thanks everybody for watching. Patrons at the advisor level, don't forget to go vote on the roundtable topic. And was there anything else? Felt like there was something. Oh yeah. Patrons at any level, go check your Patreon RSS feed for an interview with Kelly Wienersmith. She is the author of a book about both the bad and good side of emerging technologies. And we had a great conversation about how do you pass along understandable topics that are complex without getting things wrong. And let me tell you, she has a way more effective system than the one we use here. And it's really impressive. So go check that out. And anybody who's not a Patreon, that'll come into your feed on Saturday. Talk to you soon, everybody.
Bye.